Hi everyone, welcome back to Pneumanosophy Academy. I'm Lewis. I think most of us, most of the time, are deciding what the best course of action is just based on our own sense of what is the good thing to do, the right thing to do, etc. We're coming up against, loads and loads of decisions every day, and we're not doing an analysis of the pros and cons of each thing. We just have a gut sense of what the right thing to do is, and so we do that. So, we're judging what is good, we're judging what is right, and we're, responding to circumstances and experiences as they arrive. And rarely are we second guessing ourselves unless we have, good cause to question our own perception and sense of the given experience. So, for example, if one is drunk and one has an emotional response to a particular experience, they may very well stop themselves and think to themselves, although this seems like the best course of action given my current state, I know that I'm currently intoxicated and therefore it may not be. So you're second guessing yourself. So that's one possibility of you second guessing yourself. Or another one might be that you have an experience which is kind of so far outside of your kind of ordinary day-to-day experience. And although you have a kind of gut sense of how you might respond to this experience, again, it's so alien. Again, that kind of causes you to second guess yourself, and you wonder if you are really equipped to respond in the best possible way to that experience. And of course, this relates to religion. How do we know a religious claim is true? So if we take, for example, Jesus in the New Testament, he believes that he is living in the presence of God, right? And for him, that is a truth claim, which is just as real as, a claim that we might make about the material world. So, he's a carpenter, so maybe he's making a table, for example. So he makes a table. Now, to imagine, well, maybe that table isn't real. Well, for him, that is akin to imagining that God isn't real. Both are, kind of tangible, experienced realities in his world as he conceptualizes it. I think the temptation is, whenever we encounter someone with such extraordinary claims, to assume that they must be deluded in some sense, that they can't really be in their right mind. They must be irrational, right? They can't have really experienced that therefore, And people make that kind of move all the time, assuming that people are foolish or duped. But if we do assume that people are in their right mind, that they are rational agents, and we go back to what I said at the beginning, that we make judgments as to the reality of things based upon our own sense, our own experience, then it might just be as appropriate to assume that someone like Jesus just had such a powerful experience that it was enough to convince them of that tangible reality. It's kind of the nature of reality that we are forced in a certain sense to trust our own perception, to trust our own sense of nature. That is what it is to be, to live this embodied life within nature, within the world. Therefore, I think, if somebody does have their own personal experience of God, for instance, then they ought to believe in God, right? They ought to trust their own experience. Which is not to say that there are not delusions, that there are not errors. You have to always be kind of weighing your own experience with other sources. So you have to be weighing your experience against historical evidence, scientific evidence, philosophical arguments and so forth, in order that you can, be able to step back and, consider your own beliefs, be able to step back and think, well, why do I think what I think? And that adds in a kind of evolving dimension. You know, what one could believe, for example, in first century Palestine, given the scientific knowledge then, i.e. very limited, is very different to what, you know, we might believe today, even about religious and spiritual matters, given what we know scientifically in the 21st century. But we need to be careful as to not allow certain scientific philosophies to, you know, overstep the case that they're able to make, right? So, for example, with the belief of God, you know, you cannot prove or disprove scientifically a belief in God. It seems that scientifically, you know, the nature of the universe is quite ambiguous when it comes to whether there is or is not a God. And so that really does come down then to your own experience once again. And on one level, it really does come down to that, you know, trusting in our own individual experience. But, you know, if we're going to, you know, assume the humanity, the rational agency of, like, you know, significant religious individuals from history, then, you know, why would we not trust Jesus, for example, when he claims to be in the presence of God? And so it's kind of just shifting the vantage, isn't it? You know, somebody makes an extraordinary claim, they, you know, purport to have a certain experience, and the temptation might be to assume or to ask questions about, well, what counts for that experience? And, you know, we might try and identify psychological problems, or, you know, it could be a whole host of different things, couldn't it? You know, some deep-seated need to experience the divine, or it could be things that are more physical, like drug-induced experiences, you know, etc., 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 etc. Instead of doing that, instead of focusing on the experience and what caused the experience, rather, you know, like we are experiencing through our own kind of individual lens upon things, we are the experiencer. Rather, instead of thinking about, well, what caused that person's experience, instead, we should think of them as also being individual experiencers. And in this way, you know, if they are stating that they believe something based on their own experience, then we should, you know, give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that they believe that at the very least. And so to bring it back to the, you know, the belief in God question, it just slightly changes how we might think about that question. We're not kind of thinking, is a belief in God theologically defensible, philosophically, scientifically defensible? We're not thinking about it in those terms. Rather, we're wondering whether an individual believing in God is rational, reasonable. And then, of course, there's questions around, you know, what that experience for that individual was for that person to believe. You know, in the case of Jesus or Moses or, you know, any other kind of major religious figure, the kind of experiences that, you know, we get from them are monumental. And, you know, therefore, if we trust in their, you know, human individual agency, you know, it's very easy to recognize why they would have come to that belief. But for ordinary believers, you know, that don't have these extraordinary experiences, we have to kind of point to their belief in God from experience in a slightly different way. It's not the kind of big boom moments that make them come to this realization, but rather a kind of slow drip. That reality just shows up to them in such a way that it makes the reality of God believable for them. And so that's really my, you know, takeaway, that you should trust your own experience. You should, you know, trust your sense of things, trust your sense of nature as it shows up to you. Cheers again. Thanks in particular to my Patreon supporters. As always, please do like this video, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.